Even though he's not a newspaper reporter, he's a lawyer, but I consider him Canada's rock and roll Clark Kent. Kurt Dahl is the guest on today's episode.
Reluctantly.
This podcast reluctantly sponsored by ThompsonMortgages.com. It costs you nothing to make a phone call to see if you can get a better rate, a better term, and better service for your mortgage. Also, Concept.com. Concept Clothing and Culture. CONXEPPT.com. Look your best.
Reluctantly.
Hey, Kurt.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. I guess we should explain for people who are unaware. You are a drummer, also a lawyer. Now, you drum for OneBadSon, which has been a great modern Canadian rock band for the better part of 20 years here in Canada, but also an entertainment lawyer. Are you still based out of Saskatoon, or did you head out to the coast?
No, yeah, I'm in Saskatoon. Yeah,
I guess it's you can take Saskatoon out of the boy, but you can't take the boy out of Saskatoon.
it's something like that. Yeah.
So let's start off with the lawyer drummer thing. If people are wondering, you can, and it's a fascinating Instagram account, by the way. I get all kinds of information, and I couldn't wait to talk to you today. Lawyer drummer on Instagram. Being an entertainment lawyer, you have all kinds of tidbits and information and factoids and that people may not know about primarily, I guess, the music industry, but you also deal with everything from video games, TVs, and movies too.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, the focus is the music biz because that's really what I sort of live and breathe. And obviously, as a musician, I really want to talk about that more.
So let's talk about OneBadSon for a moment. How active is the band these days? I know you've had some new music in the past year and a half, 2 years. It's been inconsistent though, right?
I think that's fair. Yeah. I mean, I think we put out an EP last year, so 2024, and, did a handful of shows. I mean, right now, OBS, like we're still super passionate about making new music and playing shows, but we're not doing like the touring like crazy like we used to because we have other lives that we're really focusing on. But it's one of those things where we get to play a handful, like 5 to 10 shows a year, and there's still that magic there, So, but we used to tour in our heyday. We tour 8 months of the year, and no one wants to do that anymore. We got families and careers and that sort of thing. So it's in a really positive way. We have it as a hobby, and we love that.
As a hobby, but you still take it extremely seriously when you do. I mean, you and Shane are still primary songwriters, right?
Yeah, and we're like the two original members. And honestly, like the longer we do it, this is our 21st year as a band. Like we just really, it means more and more every year because we know, A, how much sacrifice we've had to make over the years, and B, most bands don't get to keep going, and our fans are amazing. We get up on stage and it's like, that magic feeling is still there. And that's what I always said from the outset is like, let's keep doing it until we don't feel that magic anymore. And hopefully that never goes away. And thankfully it hasn't gone away, but you see, you can tell certain bands you go see the magic isn't there. They're just doing it for the money or ego or whatever. That's not great to see. Right.
And you bring up a really valid point. It's not infinite. I mean, there is unless you're the Rolling Stones, mind you. In the middle of December, the Stones decided to cancel their European tour because Keith says he can't do it anymore with his arthritis. So the Stones are even finding that things may be coming to an end, but it's not infinite. It is finite, and kind of like I suppose you could compare it to a professional athlete's career, right?
Yeah, and you're right. And some athletes go on too long, and they should have retired a year or two before. And I think part of your legacy gets hurt if you do that, right? And again, like right now, I feel like when we do play, it's like it's as good or better than we've ever been. So I think we always set a high standard. I mean, I think we're both our own worst critics, so if we're going to do it, let's make sure it's bloody awesome. And thankfully it still has been,
How's the dynamic of the band now? Because you and Shane being the original members there for 21 years, and now you've got Ryan on bass and you've got Tara on guitar. By the way, what do you have against bass players? You seem to go through them like underwear.
It's like the Spinal Tap drummer thing, I guess. But, honestly, and I think part of it is good bass players are just hard to find, I mean, and even Ryan, who he's an amazing player. He's a guitar player first, and he plays bass for us because we need a bass player, and he's amazing. But maybe bass is the least glamorous instrument, so there's less people doing it. But the dynamic, honestly, is great. Like, it's really positive, and it's almost like, because we've been through a lot of things over the years, and like when we were at our busiest, we were like touring like crazy, burning the candle at both ends. I would say that was probably the point when we were the least happy. We were like, it became a job, which everyone always talks about, right? Like, you work so hard for success, and then when it comes, that's when the real hard work begins, and it can become like a job. And it definitely did that for us. We were all just like burnt out, and that led to a bit of infighting, whatever, which is expected in a band. And then that just kind of made things difficult for a year or two, and whereas now we come back to it, and again, we're not in the rat race in terms of a band. We do it for fun, and we do the shows we want to do, and release the music we want to release. There's no label like pushing us one way or the other, so we have way more artistic freedom too, and also financial freedom. Like, we have other jobs, so we're not like we have to tour to pay the bills, which again puts you in a tough position. So right now it's like, I feel like when you get together, it's just the most laid back and fun that it's ever been, which is a pretty sweet gift.
There's been times, though, where, I mean, you talk about burning the candle at both ends and that sort of thing. When you have a number one record like you did with Raging Bull, what was that, back in 2017? And then were you touring with the Stones, or just sharing the stage with the Stones, or opening for them? What
Yeah,
was?
we shared the stage. It was 2019. Yeah, exactly. Well, I would say the craziest thing was our busiest year, which we had number one song. I think it was actually 2018 where it went number one. And, we toured like crazy, played with the Stones, did all these things. I remember like by the end of the year, we were just totally bagged. And I thought, well, we must have had a good, financially successful year, because after all these years of hard work, it'd be nice to pay down some bills. And I remember that we got our taxes back in March. I think we each made like 45 grand or something, and I was just like, what the, it's different than I envisioned having a number one song would be, but that's the music biz, the modern music biz anyway.
Yeah, because I've heard in the past that if you have a number one song, it's basically a check for $1 million if everything falls into place. But that must be number one in the U.S. or number one in North America, or like what's the difference between a number one song in the U.S. and a number one song in Canada?
Well, I mean, typically what I say, and I see this from the legal side, is that, there's 10 times the population in America, typically about 10 times the money if you have a number one there versus Canada, right? So that 45 grand we each made could have in theory been 450 grand each if we would have done the same thing and in America. So we tried to break in America, and just never really happened. It's, we didn't have a label that was really that active in the US. So, I mean, it's a tale as old as time, a Canadian band that does well in Canada, but doesn't do anything in the US. And I think it also came at the time where, if we would have wanted to invest in breaking in the US, it would have been even more time away, like never going home, essentially, right? And none of us, we were so bagged from doing that in Canada to get the success that they're like, you want to try it in the States? And we're just like, oh my God. And starting off, going from, say, a $10,000 guarantee in Canada, dropping down to $800 in the US, like, we just couldn't justify it. And I don't regret that at all. It's around that time, I had my firstborn, and like the thought of being on the road for an entire year, like, it was just, I wasn't going to entertain it,
And I mean, you can count on one hand how many Canadian bands have gone on to do that. I guess more recently, if you want to talk about the last 25 years, I mean, if you go back to the Guess Who and Bachman Turner Overdrive and Rush and that sort of thing. I mean, Rush, got a big break because some dude on the radio was playing their shit on a Texas radio station or whatever it was, and then all of a sudden it breaks across the U.S. That was going to be one of the things that did you not have a record company that was pushing it down in the States? But you kind of answered that. But I mean, there's the other thing too. You fall into the same category as like a Kim Mitchell or the Tragically Hip, or the Tragically Hip selling out arenas 2 nights and 3 nights in each city, and then they go down and they're playing bars to 30 people in El Paso and that sort of thing. It's like they've been on Saturday Night Live, for Christ's sakes. What are they supposed to do? Like, how do you catch a break as a band, right?
Well, that's one of the great things, the great mysteries to me is like the sheer number of amazing, like I'm a huge hip fan, and the sheer number of amazing songs like that are just like bona fide hits, like how was New Orleans is Sinking not a hit in the States? It's a US city they're talking about. Or like, Ahead by a Century. To me, it's just a universal song. How could that not be hit down there? It's one of those things where it just shows you, as a music nerd and music industry nerd who reads so many biographies of so many of my idols, like there's so many stories in the music biz where such an incredible talent just never broke through, like I think of like Big Star, for example, or Nick Drake, or these, even the band like the Kinks, who I think are one of the greatest bands of all time. The Kinks never really broke through in America. And it's like, to me, they're on par with like the Beatles and the Stones. But like for every artist that makes it, there's a million that just never did,
And then we have conversations. Like I did a podcast with Haley Benedict. You know Haley. She's from St.
Yeah,
Albert.
she's great. Yeah.
So I had a podcast with Haley from talking about her, because I first saw her at Constable Wynn's memorial sort of service that was happening throughout the day, a community thing, and she was, I think, 13 years old, and she was singing. And I put her family, her mom, in touch with Bobby Cameron. And then from there, Haley's hard work just kept on snowballing. And it got to the point where at the time when we did the podcast, that was when Things My Mama Say was about to come out. And she had just signed her deal. And we talked about how hard you have to work to get that deal. And then, like you said earlier, that's when the work starts. It's kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He would start doing his exercises and whatnot, and then as soon as he would feel that lactic acid build up and that it would start getting difficult, that's when he would start counting.
It's a great analogy, yeah. Well, and I think for me, like that's what I found, to your point at the outset, like the Clark Kent, whatever thing, that's, people know me as the guy with 2 careers, whatever, and that was the real challenging part, was when there was a time when no one gave a shit about either career of mine, right? The entertainment law or the musician. I was living in Vancouver. The band hadn't broke through yet. I was a nobody because I just moved there in terms of entertainment law. Like no one, who's this long-haired lawyer in town? And that's when you gotta, like you said, the Arnold analogy. That's when you really got to push hard when you're up against everything and you push that extra degree, and when no one's watching, right? And Arnold makes his gains when no one's looking, and then he flexes them on stage when they are years later. But I think that was, so true. I think it's for everyone. It's like, when you're chasing your dream, people think like it's just going to come true if you just try for a little bit. It's like, for us, it was with OBS, it took us 8 years to get our first hit, and it took me about 8 years to sort of really break through as an entertainment lawyer,
Reluctantly.
This podcast, reluctantly sponsored by ThompsonMortgages.com. Did you know that 60% of Canadian mortgages come up for renewal in 2025 and 2026? Is yours one of them? This is a great reason why you should reach out to ThompsonMortgages.com. Don't just DocuSign that email that comes from your current lender. Reach out to ThompsonMortgages.com. Ask Mike or any one of the team members if you should be on a fixed rate, a variable rate. What kind of terms should you be looking at? These are great questions for anyone at ThompsonMortgages.com. And if you do reach out, please let them know that you heard about this on the Reluctantly podcast. Tell me the story about Scarecrows, because that's an interesting story, and it made me think of Justin Bieber when I was following along to what was going on with OneBadSon with Scarecrows, because you used to go around and end up on radio stations' front steps trying to play your music live in front of program directors and music directors, right?
Well, I'd say, Terry, that's the first time I've heard OBS compared to Bieber. So like, we're breaking new ground here,
Well, but that's the thing. That's what Justin Bieber was doing. He was showing up on front steps of radio stations with his guitar, just playing. And so as the staff was coming in, there was this kid playing on the steps, and he couldn't help but get noticed. And that was the same sort of thing OneBadSon was doing.
Well, and I, to be fair, I think he stole the idea from us. But yeah, so
Of
the idea
course.
was, and so I got the idea from Airheads, the movie where they basically hijack a radio station, take it ransom. We didn't want to go that far and incur criminal liability, but we had the song and Scarecrows. I knew, like, I can't sing worth a damn, but when I hear a song that's great, like I know right away, I know it's a hit, and that's just something I'm self-aware of. Like I can't sing a melody, but when I hear a great melody, like I know it, right? And so Scarecrows, as soon as we wrote it, I was like, this is it, you guys. And the record label didn't agree, and the radio programmers, like the radio team, didn't agree either. They're like, it's not active enough for active rock, right? Because it's mid-tempo rock song. It's like our least heavy song, our least rocking song, but I just knew there was something there. So long story short, I just said to the label, I was like, this is our first single, I know, but you got to trust me. It's my gut instinct. If I'm wrong, then I won't pick ever again. And even our management was like, I don't think so. But myself and Shane believed in it. And so we released the song. Locally, people loved it. Like Saskatoon, Regina started playing it, which helped get it on the charts. We're talking like top 30, and I was like, we need to get Shane, our singer. He's got a 1 in a million voice. If we get him in front of a crowd, like a radio crew, they're at least going to like spin the song. Right. So we had Shane and Hicks go to each, we didn't bring the whole band because we were so broke back then. We just could only afford to send 2 of them. So that's when we were living in Vancouver. We sent them from Van. We started in Vancouver at like whatever, Seafox. They never played it ever. So that didn't work. But we went to Kelowna, Kamloops. You start going into Alberta, Saskatchewan, and then Manitoba. We just kept going from west to east. And I would set it up. I was working in my office at the time as a lawyer during the day, wasting all my time trying to book this radio tour and use the connections that I developed over the years with these radio stations. Is 5 years, 8 years in the making, and the song was good enough to at least get the guys into the station. So they got in, and again, once they played it live, the people were just like, let's do it, let's spin it. And so we kind of like, I had the map of Canada in front of me, and we just went from west to east and just knocked down each city and each station. And by the time we got to, Oshawa, the song had gone like top 10. And once it was top 10, then we kept going further east. I think we went into like New Brunswick, and once they met the guys, they started spinning the song, and next thing you knew, it was top 5, and that was our big breakthrough.
Right on. It is a great story. And which of the 2 is the Steve Buscemi character from Airheads?
Yeah, exactly. That'd be our guitar player Hicks. Yeah.
Reluctantly.
This podcast reluctantly sponsored by Concept Clothing and Culture. ConXEPPT.com. Handcrafted suits, custom tuxedos, and tailored essentials. Suits starting at $1,188. Made to measure, right here in downtown Edmonton. Concept, ConXEPPT.com. If you reach out to Dave or anyone at Concept.com, please let them know that you heard about them on the Reluctantly podcast. So you're an entertainment lawyer, and you made reference to what I talked about in the opening. You're Canada's, I consider you Canada's rock and roll Clark Kent, even though you're not a newspaper reporter. You're a lawyer and you're a drummer. Can you get changed in a phone booth? That's the question. Can you go from one to the other in a phone booth?
I've done it. I mean, not exactly at phone booth, but like honestly, there was times when it was like literally, like I'd pack my suitcase. We'd have a show that night, and during the day, like let's say we're in Toronto, and I literally like showed up all day. I'm in meetings as a lawyer with I did put the glasses on similar to your glasses. Like it was intentional. I didn't, they weren't prescription. They're just like prop glasses to kind of like lean into the lawyer and the Clark Kent vibe. And then I'd be meetings all day, and then literally change it at happy hour into, my leather vest and tank top and rock and roll, leather pants. Sometimes, in the back of a car was more frequent than a phone booth. But I've always had these two passions, right? And I think in the early years, I tried to kind of keep the two separate from each other and even like secret from each other, because I think that musicians don't think that lawyers are cool, and lawyers don't think that musicians are very bright. So I thought, what's the point of letting either side know about the other side, right? So I'd kind of hide the fact that I was a musician from lawyers, and then vice versa with musicians. So, and at some point I just realized, like, I am both things. Like, these are two things that I just really am. And that's when I embraced the lawyer drummer sort of imagery and the brand. And ironically, that's when things started to take off for both. So they kind of, it was actually my worst nightmare at the time. What if both take off at the same time? Actually, my worst nightmare is neither take off, and then I'm just a failure, a
I was
failure on
just gonna
both, right? Yeah, no one gives a shit about either. So both took off at the same time, and I was like, how am I going to do this? Like, I do have to pick one. That was my big worry. And the reality was, like, I could do both. I mean, it was kind of crazy, and no one had really done it before. But I remember really driving down the highway in the tour bus, and we got a number 5 song in this country, and I'm in the back of the bus negotiating a contract with my AirPods in, on phone calls, drafting deals and making deals happen. I think, I was younger then, so I had the energy, which helps, right? It was really burning the candle at both ends, but I loved both, so it didn't feel like I was, it didn't feel like that hard of work, because I just loved what I was doing on both sides.
So, as an entertainment lawyer, are you an agent, or do you represent artists? What is it exactly that where do you fall into in the music industry?
Yeah, good question. I mean, a lot of people ask, what the hell does an entertainment lawyer do? I mean, really, it's like I'm just like a regular contract lawyer, but with cooler clients. So it's like tons of contracts, right? Negotiating a lot of artists, like a lot of, household name artists are my clients, management deals, record deals, publishing deals, getting songs and film and TV, that sort of thing. But I also represent, labels, managers, and publishers, right? So it's growing to be on the industry side as well. So not an agent, like not getting shows, that kind of stuff, but definitely part of the team of any successful artist. You want to have your manager, your booking agent, your publicist, and your record label, and a great entertainment lawyer. So a lot of my clients, I'm involved with on a weekly basis, and just advising them and protecting them from bad contracts and that sort of thing.
I guess that's as good a place as any to start. You talked about record deals, you talked about management deals, you talked about publishing deals. What's the difference between a record deal, a management deal, and a pub? Oh, first of all, what's the difference between a record deal and a publishing deal?
Yeah, great question. I mean, ultimately, it's like there's two different copyrights in a song. One is in the song itself, like the songwriting, and then one is in the recording of that song, right? So if you look at, like, Leonard Cohen, Hallelujah, he wrote the song and recorded a master, but there's also the Jeff Buckley version and a million other covers. But Leonard Cohen gets all the revenues from the publishing, right? So that's the publishing deal. It's the songwriting. Whereas each person who records a master of that song could have a record deal related to that. So Jeff Buckley's version made his record label millions because it was such a success, but it also made Leonard Cohen millions more because it was such a success, right? So really, it's just the two different types of copyrights. That's the big difference between record deal and pub deal.
Okay, so then if Jeff Buckley makes millions for his record company by recording a Cohen song, in which Leonard Cohen makes millions of dollars because he wrote the song, how much is Jeff Buckley making?
Yeah, good question. I mean, sadly, he died before he could see it, but I mean, I'm sure his estate, is still worth a lot of money. I mean, but if you write your own songs, there's twice as much revenue in it for you, in theory. That's a loose, approximation. But, like, I always tell artists, like, if you write your own songs, that's a real gift, because, like, there's some artists never write their own stuff. Like Elvis, never wrote his own songs in general. It was mostly other people. He did fine financially, but he would have made twice as much if he wrote his own songs. It's just, that wasn't his thing, right? So at the end of the day, if you can be a songwriter and a recording artist, like, you're really set up to succeed.
Well, it's funny you bring up Elvis. So, say Elvis did write his own songs, but didn't Elvis have a deal with Colonel Tom Parker where everything that Elvis made, Colonel Tom Parker made 49 or 51% of it, and it went down to like even screwy deals that ended up taking some of the money from his real estate acquisitions and somebody like
Oh yeah.
everything. Like he just got screwed, glued, and tattooed left, right, and center, didn't he?
Well, and good point. Like that's honestly, that's why I became an entertainment lawyer. Like I read so many biographies of musicians growing up. Like that was once I got bit by the rock and roll bug. I mean, I listened to, just spent hours in my room listening to records and reading about these rock stars that were idols of mine. And the one common denominator in every biography I read was that every one of these people were screwed over by someone in a suit. And whether that be like the early black musicians in rock and roll, where they were just horribly exploited, but all musicians were horribly exploited in the early days, and it still happens today. So I thought that if I could become the guy in the suit that actually protects musicians and acts as a shield and sometimes a sword on their behalf, I mean, that'd be a noble calling. And that's really, I remember when the idea hit me, because I wrote the LSAT, like the test to get into law school, kind of on a whim. I had long hair like I do right now. I had big bushy sideburns and a motorbike, and I loved T-Rex and Led Zeppelin. And I'm like, I wonder if I should like, it'd be kind of cool to be a lawyer that was like the cool lawyer representing musicians. I go and write the LSAT on a whim, like no preparation for it. And I did really well. I got the mark back and I was like, holy shit, this is actually, maybe this is a sign. I was a lot more like, maybe not flaky, but a lot more like the universe has spoken to me sort of back then.
Well, if it's a sign, you can go ahead and say you're a long-haired, freaky people, and
Yeah,
you
exactly.
did it, you applied.
Nice one. And so, honestly, and that's when the idea hit me, is like, let's be the musician lawyer. And that was literally, I was 20 or something. And fast forward now, I'm 44 and I'm doing it. And it's just kind of like, it's kind of cool to pause and look back and be like, hey, I'm kind of doing what my 20-year-old self thought would be a decent way to make a living. So here we are.
I talked to Mike Plume. I've known Mike Plume. You probably know Mike as well. His daughter,
Yeah.
Ruby, just got a publishing deal and moved out to Los Angeles. Mike and Jenny are so proud of her, and I am too. I've known, Ruby since she was little, and my son and her have played music together, and so we're super excited about that. I can't imagine how, as parents, Mike and Jenny feel about that, but it comes down to the thing that you mentioned before: writing your music, writing your songs, owning your songs, and having that as you control your own destiny, owning your masters, owning your publishing, because then you control everything, unless you get into a situation where you're either playing on songs or you are part of a writing composite that, a group of people that happen to be in a studio at the time, and then you're trying to get your money out of this person or that person or YouTube or whatever the case, and everything is completely different now. But what is it that is happening now that all of these artists that we're seeing, and it's all genres, but I hear about the classic rock ones like Queen and Springsteen. Everybody's selling their catalogs. Is it
Yeah.
because they want to get the money now, enjoy the money now, disperse the money now if they have it, is in a situation where they can, send it off to their family, and they don't want to wait for the royalties to continue to accrue? Is that basically what it comes down to?
I think so. I mean, like I know with Bob Dylan, like he had made some comment that, yeah, like he wanted to give it to people now while he was alive, right? And or have control over it now, as opposed to when you die and it's just, it goes to your, well, who knows where it goes, right? But it's a pain in the ass to administer for all the kids, right? So this way he sells it now and then divvies it up. Well, it's like giving your inheritance now before you're gone, right? But I think also you can take that money. Well, the valuations are high also, which is great, right? Like we're in this era now, especially with like the streaming numbers are really dictating these valuations, so they can take the numbers and sort of extrapolate what the catalog's worth. But who knows where that's going to go? I mean, especially with AI, will Springsteen's catalog be worth 500 mil in 10 years or 30 years? Who knows, right? So part of it's like, let's get the money while the offer is high, and maybe do something good with it, or whatever. I mean, um, I think that's my guess, is that the valuations are high, and also you want to control things while you're alive.
You mentioned streaming. Why aren't artists, why aren't bands, writers, singers, artists, why aren't they being paid for their music? Like, how come there's not advances from record companies anymore? And I know some of the deals were bass backwards, where they'd get the advance and it would take forever to pay back the record company. And before they would be earning any of their money, they'd get screwed by, like you said, the suits. But why aren't artists being paid for their music these days?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it's like the artists that are streaming like crazy amounts, they get a decent amount of payments. But you're right, that's like the 0.1%. I guess if you want my sort of my worldview, is that the tech companies are making all the money right now, right? It's what's Spotify valued at, right? Like it's and streaming, like there's obviously pros and cons to it. Like a pro is that you get your music out there without having to sell your soul to a record label, if you're, say, an indie artist. And if you do really well in terms of, like, pushing to your demographic of fans, you'll make like 100 grand a year, and add to that with touring, etc. And again, is that as good as it was in the old days where people are paying $20 for a CD? Well, no, but that system had its problems too. I mean, to your point, there was the accounting, record label accounting was criminal, and you could sell a million records and think you should be making all this money, and the label gives you your statement and it's got all these deductions you didn't know you approved. And so, like, the old system was flawed, the current system is flawed. I think at the end of the day, and I see a lot of people now sort of boycotting Spotify, and I think it's, there's definitely validity there, because based on what Daniel Ek is investing in and that sort of stuff. So it's, the whole industry is changing, that's for sure. That's the short answer. And I do think my overall worldview is that musicians and creative people should be paid more in general. It's, the arts have always been horribly undervalued by society, unless you become like the Picasso of the world, but that's really rare.
Bands are still making the same for one night of music than they were in 1986. It's criminal when they play live.
Yeah, or less. I mean, I remember when OneBadSon was touring like crazy, just meeting other musicians that, like, they're big touring musicians in the 80s, and they said we used to play 7 nights a week and we'd get paid well every night, and we struggled to find venues 7 nights a week. I mean, we couldn't do it, right, with OneBadSon. There's fewer live venues, right? And so, yeah, I think the industry is going through, like, to be a touring. If OneBadSon was coming out now and breaking through with a hit at radio, or wherever it is on streaming, things would be a lot tougher than they were. And I thought they were really tough at the time.
46 years of radio for this guy. So
Congrats.
since 19, yeah, thanks. It seems like just yesterday. But since 1980, since I was 15 years of age, I have seen and done and sent out SOCAN reports here in Canadian radio, working at the various radio stations that I have been employed by. And that is one way that music and the people who make it, the musicians, get paid.
Yep.
And they get paid from Canadian radio stations, from Canadian radio companies. It didn't matter if it was a mom and pop organization back in the day, or if it was a major cross-country network. SOCAN, Society of Canadian Arts and I can't remember what
Authors
it
and something. Yeah.
but in the United States of America, a market 10 times the size of Canada, they have no such thing as a SOCAN, as a thing for musicians and artists and the music. The radio stations down there don't pay the musicians that supply the music for their entertainment and their advertising dollar, right?
Well, they've got ASCAP and BMI. So they do pay, but it's just not quite the same system. But yeah, I mean, like, there is, the royalties still flow. If you get if OneBadSon gets spun on US stations, we still get paid. It's a bit different, and maybe it's less per spin than it would be in Canada, but there still is a system in place for them to get paid.
Well, what is Gene Simmons like over the past little bit there, leading up to Christmas and everything? He's been in front of congressional whatever or Senate or whatever, talking about how the radio industry has been ripping off musicians in the U.S. for as long as he's been alive.
I haven't seen the interview or like him those comments, but I'm guessing what he could be referring to is the performers don't get paid. So, like the Elvis example we gave earlier, the writer of the song would get paid in America for radio play, but Elvis wouldn't for his performance. Whereas in Canada, you do get those neighboring rights. So maybe that's what he's talking about. That'd be my guess. Because although he's a writer, so he would have to worry about it, but he'd get more money as a performer as well. So I think that's my guess. That's what he's talking about.
When you're a musician, obviously, you were talking about how you have to work so hard to get to the point where OneBadSon has been having a number one song in Canada. There's also a thing that can end up being a bit of a gold mine, and that's inclusion in television and movies. Is that not correct?
Yeah, honestly, that's some of my favorite negotiations as a lawyer is negotiating film and TV deals. Because I've seen it happen firsthand where the right placement changes your life as a musician, and it's there's still a lot of money there, right? Like even though obviously the film industry is being hit hard by AI, and we'll see where that goes, of course, and things are moving more to streaming and less to theaters, but there's still good money in film. That's safe to say. And there's budgets. So to get a great song, especially if it's used in the trailer, it's good money for my clients. It's often, you can get 6-figure deals, that sort of thing, or at least high 5-figure deals, which it's sort of like found money as a musician. And then the key is that whatever I can get up front, the upfront payment, the back end payment is always way bigger because especially if the TV show or movie is successful. So what that means is, again, to go to the SOCAN or ASCAP BMI analogy, every time, if you wrote the song, let's say the theme song to Cheers is a good example. I mean, Cheers was so massive and everybody knows your name theme song. Every time that TV show aired, wherever it is in the world, that writer got paid, so it's millions of dollars in the back end revenues. So if you can write a jingle like that or have a song used in a trailer, I mean, that's huge money on the back end.
Friends, the Rembrandts. I'll be
Yeah,
there for you. What?
yeah.
Who wrote that song? Was it the band or was it somebody else that
No,
wrote
I,
it
I
for
think I
them?
think it was them, and they had maybe another song they tried to. It was kind of a moderate hit, but I'm guessing they never had to work a day in their life after that. Now the sad thing is, and it's not them, I don't think, because I always read about this stuff, but maybe it was the Cheers guy. Actually, I don't know, but there's some examples of this where you sort of sign away your rights on the back end and say it's a work for hire and you accept like a upfront payment. So because you're a broke musician and you don't know if Cheers or Friends is going to become a mega hit. So you take the 20 grand up front and that would literally be 5-10 million in the back end, right? Which is just those people. I mean, I don't know how I could live with myself if that was me, but
There's a few examples of one end and the other end of that. Vincent Price in the Michael
oh,
Jackson
Thriller,
song
yeah, yeah.
Thriller. Remember, what did he take? 20 grand to do that voiceover for Michael
I think
Jackson?
I think less than that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and he could have taken off the back end and got a nickel for every album sold or
1%.
whatever it could have been.
Yeah, 1% could have been, yeah. And I think his kids tried to sue over that and, weren't successful, but
And then on the other hand, you look at somebody like a George Lucas or what I'm trying to think, was it Jack Nicholson that didn't take a huge upfront thing to play the
on
Joker? He took
Batman, yeah, yeah, he took the just
yeah,
cut of the back end, yeah.
and cut of the back end, and he ended up making so much money from that. So that's the kind of stuff that makes you go like this. You just love getting your hands dirty in that kind of thing, right?
Well, I mean, ultimately, I love making my clients wealthy, or making them money. I see so many artists struggle, right? It's hard to be an artist, whether that be film, TV, music, whatever. So when I can like put 6 figures, 7 figures in my client's bank account, like that's the best feeling. Cause then it just, it buys freedom, right? Whatever they do with it, whether they're buying farmland or buying an acreage or buying a car. I mean, whatever. It's like, or taking some time off and hanging with their family, like whatever it is. It's a pretty cool feeling.
OneBadSon recorded Psycho Killer by the Talking Heads.
Yep.
Now, what was involved in order for OneBadSon, your band, to record that? Was there a bunch of hoops and barrels that you had to jump through, or did you just do it, record it, and then you ask for forgiveness later, or do you have to get permission?
No, and that's the great thing. I mean, you just get a mechanical royalty. So not every song, but most songs in the world, the artist, the writer has allowed there to be mechanical royalties. In other words, once you release it and it's out in the public, anyone can cover it, and then you pay the mechanical royalty. So it's like, an example would be like if you bought the song on iTunes, for every 99-cent purchase, 9 cents goes to the original writers. So, and same with like streaming royalties, a certain percentage goes to the writers. YouTube views, a certain percentage goes to David Byrne and the rest of the crew. So no permission needed. We just did it and kind of tried to reinvent it and put it through the lens of OneBadSon. And yeah, that's no problem. Like you can just get the mechanical for that.
You are one of the primary songwriters in OneBadSon. Can I play your music on my podcast right now if I wanted to? Can you give me verbal permission to do so? And then I don't have to go through a bunch of hoops and barrels to play music on a podcast?
I would love to say yes, Terry, but so to go back to the whole 2 copyrights thing. So on the songwriting side, I could ask the other songwriters and we give you the green light because it's you, but on the master side, we don't own the masters. Our record label does at the time, our former record label, 604 Records in Vancouver. So, I mean, I could reach out to 604 and get permission, assuming they'd give it. But yeah, you have to get, so in that example, you have to get the approval from the writer, like the publishing side and the master side. Yeah.
Well, I guess that's why it goes to show you that's why so many people who are no longer in the radio business start up podcasts, but they just end up blathering away or whatever, or interviewing people or whatever, and they never start playing songs. It's like, here's the Eagles and already gone. No, I don't think so. You're going to have to talk to Mr. Felder and and a number of other people, their estates and whatnot, in order to get permission. Yeah. And if you don't, what's the fine? What can happen if you start playing a bunch of music on a podcast or something like that, live streaming? What can happen?
Well, what happens is, yeah, I mean, it gets you, like someone will probably reach out to the artist, like someone who knows them, or these things can be flagged, whatever. And yeah, you get a cease and desist from their lawyer, right? So I've drafted many of those. Again, and sometimes it's for good reason. Like one of my clients, I won't say who, but it's a household name. Like his song's being used on this podcast. It was sort of like I wouldn't say far right, but like, enough. Like it was, he did not agree with the podcast, the messaging and whatever. So that was an easy, like, F you, take it down now, or we're going to sue kind of thing. But even if it wasn't something extreme like that, I mean, it is your artwork, your copyright, and people want to be at least kept in the loop or aware of it, if not compensated. But, for small podcasts, I get it. It's not like there's like a bunch of money there, but the principle remains the same, I would say.
OneBadSon.com. On Instagram, he is Lawyer Drummer, and I highly recommend the follow because it's really interesting. And I honest to God, I've half-assed expected a bill from you a number of times with the amount of emails that I've sent to you with questions about my son's career and whatnot. But I do appreciate the help, and I appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for chatting with me, and all the best in 2026, man.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate that, man. And yeah, honestly, any listeners, like, I think a lot of times musicians are, to your point, like afraid to reach out to lawyers. But honestly, I've saved a lot of musicians a lot of hassle, a lot of trouble over the years. Just don't just sign something. Reach out to someone like me, lawyerdrummer.com or whatever, Instagram. Yeah, don't just sign something because you're afraid to reach out to a lawyer. I'm happy to help. And a lot of times I'll probably say, hey, here's my opinion. You may or may not have to hire me, but like, a lot of times I do give advice for free. So
Reluctantly.
This podcast reluctantly sponsored by ThompsonMortgages.com. It costs you nothing to make a phone call to see if you can get a better rate, a better term, and better service for your mortgage. Also, Concept.com. Concept Clothing and Culture. CONXEPPT.com. Look your best.
Reluctantly.